Yes, let us know when we're live. We live, Anna?
Can you hear me? We are live.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee for Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. Pursuant to Council Rule 60, the Council President has appointed me, Councilmember Buscaino, to serve as the interim chair of the committee for this meeting only. So with that, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Here.
Councilmember Harris-Dawson.
Present.
And Councilmember Wesson. Councilmember Wesson is absent. So there's 2 members and a quorum, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris-Dawson. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Today's meeting will focus on legislative proposals from our city departments. The state legislature and Congress will begin a new legislative cycle in January 2021. Today, we'll be discussing some departmental recommendations on what legislation the city should advocate for or sponsor, and to provide additional resources and relief for city residents when the new legislative cycle begins. For this meeting, our focus will be on legislation on 2 major issues the city has been dealing with. One is our homelessness crisis, and the other is response and recovery from the COVID pandemic. So before we begin our discussion, we'll be taking public comment. I'd like to ask Mr. Clerk to please read the call-in information.
Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-292-7434 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. When admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak.
And Mr.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read out the speaking rules to members?
Please do. Yes, Mr. City Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. So to members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 2 minutes total. Because this is a special meeting, there is no general public comment. You may only speak on the agenda items. When speaking on the items, you have to be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on topic, you'll get 1 brief warning from me or the chairman. If you don't immediately get clearly on topic or again stray off topic, the chairman will cut you off and you'll forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We'll take 25 minutes total of public comment. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you by listening to the last 4 digits of your phone number or other identifying information, if you're calling in with a blocked number, you are live in the council meeting and it's your turn to speak. Please immediately then press star 6 to unmute yourself and tell us which items you'd like to speak on. If you're also listening to the meeting on your computer, channel 35, or other device, please turn down the volume on those devices immediately. There's a several second time delay between the live meeting and the broadcast. It'll cause confusion if you listen only to the broadcast and don't turn down the broadcast when you're unmuted yourself. Once you're live in the meeting and you tell us the numbers you want to speak on, you're good to go. Thank you, Madam Chairman, or Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's now begin our public comment portion of the committee meeting.
Caller with a phone number ending in 4024, please press star 6. Please state your name and what items you'll be speaking on.
I want to use up all items on the agenda, and as I heard, rookie, I cannot speak on general public comment.
Correct. You have 2 minutes to speak on the agenda items. Please begin.
I heard, asshole. Let me start. Can someone please take control of this control freak? Now, as far as for item 1, fuck item number 1. Item number 2, fuck item number 2. Item number 3, am I on topic? Fuck number 3. Item number 4, 42 U.S.C. 1983, 45 Trump, fuck item 4. Item 5. Well, what about it? Fuck item 5. Item 6, my favorite 666 number, I agree. Item 7, fuck the developers and the budget. Item 8, fuck the corruption of LA. Item 9, fuck assholes and pistol-neck politicians who steal corruption in Los Angeles. Item 9, it's a good number, except it's a backwards number for 666. Fuck item number 9. Item number 10, fuck bitches and cunts. Item number 11, it's a historical day in life. Back in 2011, when I got my promotion, fuck item 11. Item number 12, is that the 12th district? No, asshole. Well, fuck Mitchell Englander. Item number 13, is that District 13? No, fuck item 13 too, bitch. Item 14, Kevin DeLeon, fuck you too. And Jose Luis Huizar under an FBI RICO corruption investigation.
Thank you,
Along with
Speaker.
who other?
Caller with the phone number ending in 4208, please press star 6. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yeah, it's Rob Kwan. I'd like to speak on items 8 and 9.
Please go ahead, Mr. Kwan.
I just wanted to note first, there was no audio on this call until the call-in instructions were read. So, and I also believe I heard Councilmember Buscaino chairing. I know that, council members can swap in on a committee hearing, but could you confirm that there was no amendments to any of these items and who's actually presiding over this meeting right now?
It's Mr. Buscaino, and there have been no amendments so far. Thank you, Speaker. Please continue.
And who are the other council members fulfilling the Brown Act requirements and attending this meeting?
So for the record, in case other members of the public didn't hear it, it's Mr. Marquise Harris-Dawson and Mr. Buscaino.
Great. Thank you. So I just, want to note that it's another special meeting. I don't think we've had a regularly scheduled Rules Committee meeting since March. Our regular chair, not Councilmember Buscaino, has a clear preference for avoiding general public comment, and it's shameful. But for item 8 on the Conflict of Interest Code, I think it's always worth noting what kind of responsibility the Ethics Commission has. They are dealing with hiring freeze, buyouts that have taken an axe to their staffing. They don't have any staffing to build the database that they have to build for the developer ban. And this adds to the burden on the commission, and this council has repeatedly failed to update the municipal lobbying ordinance, which further wastes the Ethics Commission's time trying to plug something with a bunch of loopholes. And it's horrible that our city attorney is really missing in action on a lot of conflict of interest situations. I mean, earlier today we had a number of recusals and no explanation provided, as required by state law. For item 9 in the recess schedule, it's kind of weird that this doesn't include planned cancellations due to COVID. We pay our council members handsomely to be full-time council members, and we haven't had, the regular 3 meetings a week that are required by the charter since March. So it's just kind of baffling that the council has no plan to actually remedy that. I don't know if that's one of those things where the city attorney just says you can be as flexible as you want until somebody sues us. But it really only seems like the city responds to that. So wanted to just note that it would be great to see the council actually be transparent about its planned recess schedule, which is the only way you can get around.
Thank you, Speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 7006, please press star 6. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yes, Daniel Snigler. I'm the chair of the Las Vegas Convention Center Bureau for Homosexuality.
Which
All
items do you
items,
want to speak on, Speaker?
Can I talk on these items, sir? All items?
You have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, precious. Let's talk about my big thing here today is supporting number 11, the federal legislative tax credit for travel. This is a great thing for our city of Vegas. So many of you council folk have come over here to Las Vegas over the years and greatly supported all of our businesses here, the casinos, especially that lovely, darling Mr. Weezer. 64 times, 30 of them by private jet. He has stimulated our economy. Where is he? Does anybody know? We haven't seen him. And we have a comp available for him right now in the top suite. And I haven't been able to get in any contact, Mr. Weezer. I wonder what happened. But we definitely support this. Imagine somebody like Mr. Faber, Mr. Other people of the persuasion like myself, sitting out by the pool, all those cute men and all those little tight tanks.
Which item are you speaking on, Speaker?
Getting a tax, travel and leisure tax credit for sitting there and getting it on and getting paid to get it on. That's why I support number 10. And that's why Nerd supports number 10. That's why she's not here. She's recusing herself because she's been pimping and pandering and doing shit for years. But that's okay. That's okay. I know Mr. Buscaino. Now he very straight gentleman. He don't do that kind of thing. So, but I support it. I hope I can get those 2 votes. Marchese now Marchese, he like it. He like it a lot, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Thank you, Speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 1403, please press star 6. Caller with the phone number ending in 1403, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Caller, you muted yourself. Please press star 6. Please state your name and the items you...
I'm just listening.
Is that the final speaker?
Yes, it's the last speaker we had on the queue.
Thank you so much. Public comment is now closed. So, Mr. Harris-Dawson, we'll take items 3, 4, 5, and 8 through 12 on consent unless you have any comments or questions. Would like to hold any of these items on the desk?
I concur with the chair's suggestion.
Thank you, sir. So without objection, items 3, 4, 5, and 8 through 12 are now approved. So, Mr. Harris-Dawson, if there are no objections on items 6 and 7, we'll approve those on consent as well with some slight amendments. For item 6, I'd like to move to remove bullets 4 and 5 under recommendation 1 in the CLA report. For item 7, I'd like to move to instruct CAO and CLA to include in their report back options for the 2022 ballot measure to fund childcare and early education and to take into consideration the COVID financial crisis and the families struggling from it in those options. Any ballot measure we move forward with has to take into consideration items 6 and 7. Any questions on those amendments, Mr. Harris-Dawson?
No, sir.
Okay, so with items 6 and 7, we'll approve those as amended without objection. Okay, with that, Mr. Harris-Dawson, let's now move to items 1 and 2. Mr. Clerk, if you can read item 1, please, into the record.
Thank you. Item 1 is a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst and resolution relative to establishing the city's position regarding the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority 2021-22 State Legislative Program Proposal.
Thank you, Michael. With this, item 1 before us, we have Jose Delgado from LASA and Pranita Amataya. Oh my goodness, I think I just butchered your last name, so I know how you feel. They do that to me all the time. Pranita Amatya.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so Pranita is from the CLA's office. Thanks for joining us. If we can just get a quick overview on the item before us, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure. The item before this committee today is proposed legislation for city's legislative program for 21-22 as proposed by LASA. The report includes recommendation to adopt the resolution to raise the state supplemental security income payment for the most vulnerable population among the homeless population. I can continue further with some more detail, or I can take questions, or maybe Jose can add.
Mr. Delgado?
Yes, good afternoon, council members, chair. We're very thankful for the opportunity to be able to provide some recommendations for city-sponsored legislation. As Pranita mentioned, one of our ideas is to help get the city to hopefully promote the increase in the state supplemental payment as part of the SSI, SSP activities. We believe that this proposal will do a number of things, including help those folks who are on the margin of homelessness either stay in their homes or be able to expand their abilities to spend additional funding on other sort of life activities, medication, food, and things of that nature. So we're more than happy to answer any questions that either of you may have for us today.
So I appreciate the report. Aside from the increase to the SSI payments, is there any other legislation we should be sponsoring or advocating for to help boarding care facilities stay open? Because as we know, these facilities are critical to solving our homelessness problem, and the rate at which they're closing is very troubling.
Sure. So increasing the state's SSI payment, or the state's portion of it, would have those sort of benefits, including the boarding care facilities. At present, boarding cares are capped at what they are allowed to charge their residents at a portion of their SSI benefit. While raising this particular cap or the rate of SSI, SSP on its own wouldn't necessarily lead to a direct increase in the reimbursement rate, it would certainly bring more resources into SSI, SSP and increase the feasibility of raising the cap. Separately, LASA will be continuing to explore other ways for the state to raise that cap that the state is allowed to, the reimbursement rate in which to assist these facilities with the cost. So if the SSI benefit were to increase, it has the sort of snowball effect of being able to hopefully shore up boarding cares, be able to allow the state to charge more into the SSI. But like you said, exploring the options of being able to get the state to increase their cap rate SSI reimbursements.
Is Mr. Harris Dawson and I can attest to, and other members of the council, we have seen a lack of consistent state funding for our homelessness crisis. And I know that the state's in a financial crunch as well, but given the magnitude of the homelessness crisis, shouldn't we be pursuing ongoing state funding for homelessness?
I'll let John chime in, but I know there are a number of other fronts that we're currently undertaking. I know a lot of the continuums of care across the state are looking for sort of a long-term stream of revenue for that particular causes. Obviously, the state, like you mentioned, council member, has been absent in this space, but I think over the last couple of years, we've seen more activity. And I feel like that will only continue to increase as sort of Sacramento starts seeing sort of the the effects of all the moratorium being lifted from current stays in January. John?
Yes, good afternoon, council members. In the current session, which is ending right now, there was the bill AB 3300, which would have allocated $2 billion annually for homeless programs and services. That bill did not pass in the current legislature, partly due to the extreme events related to COVID. I understand that there are some proposals that are being developed similar to that for the next session. We're waiting to see what some of those details might be, and as soon as they're available, we will bring them forward to you. It's important that we see more of a detail, some meat on the bones before we bring it forward for you for consideration, so that you can actually refine that in ways that are meaningful. So we will definitely keep an eye on that. It's a significant issue. Some of the work we've been doing lately on homelessness, we're concerned that there is not a dedicated firm source of funding for homelessness. We're relying on annual allocations from the state that are one-time only. We're relying on a federal grant application process that is variable. And of course, Measure Age only has a 10-year life to it. So we need to find a better way to fund our homeless service programs.
Yep, can't agree with you more. Mr. Harris-Dawson?
I've got nothing on this except to agree that we need to aggressively pursue state funding, and that there ought to be a line item given the situation. I get that we have a rainy day fund, but just to walk through our streets of, if this is not rain, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
We're in a full-on storm, so I completely agree. And I also want to make a motion that Mr. Wickham be required to prove to us that he's not faking us out with his jacket and tie, and that he's in full suit. He doesn't have on boogie board shorts.
Yeah. Stand up, John, and see it. No. So, Mr. Harris-Dawson, if you're okay with this, I'd like to approve this report and the attached resolution. But I want to instruct LASA to report back on policies the city should sponsor to advocate that would provide the city with ongoing homelessness funding. So if we can find ways to really elevate our presence in response to the homelessness crisis, not only here in the city, but throughout this region, something that we should have LASA and CLA to work on collectively. You okay with that?
Agreed.
Okay. So with that, let's approve this item as amended without objection and move on to item number 2.
Item number 2 is a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to, and resolutions relative to establishing the city's position regarding the housing year 2021-22 state and federal legislative program proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Espinosa. With that, on this item before us, we have Claudia Monterosa from HCID and Dora Huerta from the CLA's office. If you can both provide an overview of this item before us, and then we'll move to questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Dora Huerta with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. The report before you includes proposed housing state and federal legislative program for the upcoming 2021-22 legislative session. Our office reviewed several proposals submitted by the Housing and Community Investment Department and recommends that council support 6 state proposals, 3 federal proposals, and oppose 2 federal rules. In general, these positions seek to strengthen tenant protections as the need for affordable housing grows greater during the COVID-19 period, emergency period. These proposals aim to reform or repeal restrictions on funding of subsidized housing and strengthen the city's financial capacity to provide additional resources to preserve and facilitate affordable housing. Through these positions, the city also takes a stand against the separation of families in housing due to their undocumented or documented status, and opposes a recently published HUD action that would make it more difficult for tenants to challenge fair housing violations. This concludes my presentation, and I'd like to note that Representative from HCID, Claudia Monterosa, is also on the line to answer any further or specific questions on the proposals.
Thank you so much, Ms. Huerta. So on Monday, we heard from NPR a story about how many Americans were being forced to use credit cards to pay for bills they can't afford, including rent. In March, the City Council, if we recall, enacted an eviction moratorium for those impacted by COVID. And we've created the biggest rent relief program in the nation, led by our council president, but we know that people are struggling. And this problem isn't unique to Los Angeles. I've heard my involvement with the National League of Cities from local leaders across the country. Their residents too are struggling with paying rent. There are 10 million Americans who owe back rent. So we feel that we need state and federal action to help struggling families. We've been pushing for the HEROES Act, we know, and another stimulus package. I heard just today, looking at a bipartisan bill. That's going to bring billions of dollars straight to municipalities and local government. But, only the state and federal governments have that ability and the resources to help on this scale. So we need to make our top priority to advocate for or sponsor legislation for additional eviction protections and the extension of AB 30088 rather. So how do we make sure our lobbyists are pushing for this in Sacramento?
Good afternoon, council members. Claudia Monterrosa with HZLA, and we are actively working on these top legislative priorities. And as the CLA went over, one of our top priorities is seeking legislation to extend AB 3088. That is a top priority for the city, for the department. And we do understand that there is work at hand as we speak, and we are expecting some sort of introduction of a legislative proposal to do so next week. The state legislature will be meeting for, I believe, 1 day to kick off the official session for 2021. But we will wait for next week to see if that is actually introduced. AB 3088's protections end January 31st. And given that we're in the middle of another pandemic surge, we are hopeful that the state will provide the must and necessary extensions to AB 3088. A lot of what is contained in that bill converts the owed rent into consumer debt, but tenants are responsible to begin payment of that debt beginning in March 1st, 2021. So given the current situation, that seems unfeasible for a lot of folks that are still trying to, get on their feet or may have lost their jobs again as a result of the recent closures. The other big legislative priority that we're pursuing is additional or reintroduction of eviction relief at the state level to create a funding structure for localities and or service providers to provide much needed legal assistance. The city will be launching its eviction defense program or is scheduled to do so in January of 2021 based on Council President Nori Martinez's motion that authorized that emergency eviction defense program. We are also pursuing a reintroduction of an eviction data legislative priority so that we can have better assessment of where evictions are taking place in the city of Los Angeles. So this is something that we did have a sponsor last year, but it did not make it very far or was not adopted this legislative session. And those are the top priority legislative bills that we have in terms of addressing tenant protections and pursuing additional resources for eviction prevention. That was at the state level. At the federal level, there is also federal legislation that is being proposed. And now with the introduction of the new bipartisan bill, there's approximately over $900 billion that would include some rental assistance So we're hopeful that will continue to move forward, and we will work with the CLA to report back on any of that federal package that does get introduced.
I appreciate that. That was one of my questions, that we saw the CLA report include a resolution supporting eviction protections at the state level, but on the federal level, I didn't see that in the report, but you're telling me that we'll have our partners on the ground in DC will be lobbying for that.
That is something that we will continue to pursue as a department at the federal level. And there were a couple of federal bills that were introduced the year before and this year that will seek to establish some, not necessarily protection from evictions, but definitely a nationwide eviction database. So really getting at the data and what is really happening on the ground level. And of course, funding for either rental assistance or legal protections or legal assistance for tenants experiencing evictions. Okay. So that has been underway at the federal level, but it has not gotten very much movement.
All right, so we'll memorialize that request and that recommendation in this item.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
John Wickham with CLA.
Go ahead.
As Claudia mentioned, we're in this transition period between the current session and the new session. So the new state session begins next week. So anything that's kind of been in our program to date will expire, and that's why we're adding these new ideas. The HEROES Act is odd because there are a couple of weeks left where the federal, the Congress can still consider that legislation. It's not likely to pass because of the time, but we do have an item in this proposed package to consider and support legislation in the next session that begins January 3rd on the exact same category. So we do have something for next session beginning January 3rd in front of us. I believe council already has in front of it a resolution to support the HEROES Act. I don't recall off the top of my head whether we've taken a support position on that or not, but we're actually right on target with the request that you've made.
Very good. So it'll be easy. You're ahead of it. Okay, so lastly, this year we were finally able to fund an eviction defense program using our COVID CDBG dollars, but unfortunately that money will run out. So how much funding will we push for at the state level?
Well, that is to be determined. As our prior speaker from LASA explained, there are limited funding dollars for new funding programs at the state level. So we'll have to wait to see what gets introduced next legislative session. We do understand there's a surplus at the state level, so pricing surplus. However, we understand that there will be extreme caution in the utilization of those funds. However, homelessness will be a priority, but it may not be necessarily just for eviction. It may be for additional funding for affordable housing and expansion of the tax credit. Those are the kinds of things that we are hearing, and potentially an introduction of a new housing bond. The current housing bonds are set to expire in 2022. So something must be done in regards to additional resources for affordable housing development at the state level, given also the mandates that we have from the state to create a more affordable housing in our localities. So in terms of eviction protections or funding for eviction work, last year there was a bill that was introduced that had some funding allocated to that, but that went away. I don't recall the exact amount of funding that was introduced, but it was in the millions of dollars, but that did not make it. And that's with a surplus, and that did not make it because it would have created a new funding responsibility for the state. But we are pursuing that in our legislative priorities that are before you for consideration today.
Thanks for that response. I know, under the leadership of Council President Martinez and others in the City Council, we've been trying to collect data for the last couple of years on eviction data. what are the barriers for getting this information? I know that we've been trying to make adjustments to our eviction defense program and make sure we're serving the right people, but it's critical that we get this timely information. Can you just share with us some of the barriers?
Absolutely. We have been working on this specific issue for the last, I would say, 3 years. And we have reached out to the LA Superior Court. I think the biggest barrier is getting access to the database and how that could actually be relayed or provided to localities. We've considered or discussed establishing some sort of MOU between the courts and localities that would like to have access to this. And this is why we're presenting and pursuing this legislative proposal at the state level, so that the state could hopefully indicate to the Judicial Council at the state level to allow for this data to be available. So there's been some progress in terms of discussions at the state level. That is going to be reintroduced. We do expect that that bill to be reintroduced, or that item to be reintroduced for 2021. And so we will continue to work on that. And I also would like to add that this is something the LA County is also pursuing, since they also have an eviction defense program and rental assistance program. And so we are, working or communicating with one another to, really bolster the support and advocate to have access to this data. So we will be reporting on that, because we need to be able to discern where the evictions or the filings are taking place, so that we can better size the problem in the city of Los Angeles and how to better serve residents and what are the hotspots. What we have right now available to us is proxy information, that includes various indicators such as household income, where the most renters live, single female-headed households, and other poverty indicators to help us kind of discern where we should be focusing our efforts. But we need the exact number of unlawful detainers and the causes for those unlawful detainers, and that information is not available in the state of California. It's not.
Understood. Mr. Harris Dawson, questions, comments on this item?
No, except to thank the staff for being on top of this and making sure we have a coherent strategy, and also being aware of what the county is doing in the same regard. I do think there's every potential for a eviction tsunami in the country, and we were already teetering, as those of us who are on the housing committee know, we were already teetering near that in the city anyway, with the rent, with evictions, particularly in our areas that have a lot of low-income apartments. Evictions were rising at an alarming pace already before COVID. And I guess if there's one question I might have. I know we made the rent registry a few years ago, and I know that's in process. One of the dynamics that we see here in South LA, in my district, the northern part of Mr. Buscaino's district, Mr. Price's district, even though we've had the eviction moratorium on, we drive throughout our districts and we see apartments full of furniture and belongings out on the curb. And what we hear is that people are just abandoning their apartments because they don't have rent and they don't know how they're going to get it. So they're just saying, I quit now, and instead of waiting for eviction. Do we have a way of knowing, when people sort of walk away from leases like that? Is it possible? Is it a piece of data that we could possibly get?
At this point, that information is not collected, and we would have to do some real thinking about how to collect that through a variety of methods, mostly by really close coordination with CBOs that are working with tenants that may be impacted. I mean, as it is, it's very difficult to get information of what's going on the ground, in terms of evictions, 3-day notices, harassment, illegal evictions. And we're hopeful that through the collection of some initial data in the eviction defense program, we can have a better sense. this is a brand new, or not a brand new, but another layer, and we would have to figure out how we could get folks that have just decided to get up and just, call it quits and just say, you know what, I'm just gonna, move on now. And there is no easy way to do that, unfortunately. So we can add that to our list to ask and to think through, because I think it would be interesting to see what population is being forced out or not able to pay their rent or be able to stay in the city. We will be collecting a series of key indicators in our intake process through the eviction defense program. So that will start help shape some of that thinking and better cater to the needs of the residents. But unfortunately, I don't have a concrete response for you on that specific issue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Aristotles, if you're okay with that, for this item before us, item two, I'd like to move to approve the CLA report and the attached resolution with some minor adjustments. I'd like to instruct HCID and CLA to report back with recommendations for policies that we should sponsor or support related to homelessness prevention and community investment. As we know, eviction protections are essential to homelessness prevention, but I think we need to pursue more policies and funding on prevention. I'd also like to instruct CLA to prepare a resolution in support of federal legislation on an eviction moratorium and on a mortgage and rental assistance.
I concur.
Thank you so much. Sorry for disruption. My wife is on the Zoom in the room next door. I don't know if you can hear that. But nonetheless, this item is approved as amended without objection.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, I believe the desk is clear.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for those who've joined us, those in chamber, Anna Streffen. Appreciate your support, and thanks for all your work. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Be kind, be safe, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.